Hi, welcome to the Handyverse. Today I'm going to use photos and some 3D models to show you how I made this here dining room table. Stick with us. Once we had our nook done, we needed a custom sized table for this area, so I looked for different plans online. I couldn't find anything that was exactly what I needed, so I cobbled something together myself. The top was inspired by plans I found on Shanty to Chic. I'll put a link to that below. They offer free plans for a full table, but the leg system wasn't what I was looking for. So what I've done is I've made what I like to call an expanded pedestal. We didn't want legs in the corners because we wanted it to be easy to get in and out of the nook. And but a pedestal in the middle, I thought the table was too big and it wouldn't be stable. So what I did was take those points and spread them out and make it a bit more stable. And this thing is solid as a rock right now, so it worked out really well. Now, one of the neat things about this table is that I built it in two separate pieces, and the bottom here is actually, it has a cradle in it, so you lower the top down on it and you secure it with a few screws and it holds it in place nicely, which was necessary in this case because it wouldn't fit through the door otherwise to get into the room. So the first part of the build was building the top. It was necessary to do the top first because I needed to know what the top was going to be like, so to make sure it would fit into the base. I started by cutting 7 of the 2x6s to length, and in my case we needed this tabletop to be 58 inches by 36 inches. It ended up being 36 1/4, just the way it worked out with cutting the boards. But to cut, our first cuts were these 7 2x6s, and since we wanted a 58-inch length, we had, and it's framed by a 2x4 around the edge, we had to take off 3 inches, so we cut 7 to 55 inches. And then I used a router bit to cut a groove in the middle of each one in the seam, and I put a 1/4 inch piece of plywood in the middle and squeezed it together to make sure that these seams stayed nice and flush over time. On the back, I used Craig jig to secure them together using screws. Once I had all 7 of those boards together, I framed it using the 2x4. So I mitered these corners to make it a bit cleaner on the finished product. So you can see I've got a nice miter on each corner, and this was pretty tricky to frame it in. I had to get creative with my clamping, and once I did get it in place, I only put it in temporarily because I had a problem where one corner of the table was down low, it was twisted. There was a twist in the overall surface that I had to try and figure out a way to get taken out of. My solution to the warping was to put this X-style brace on the back of it, using a couple of 2x4s in a cross pattern, and I kept the total length on one on the worst part of the twist. So what I did was I used some clamps and a couple of straight 2x4s that I had, and I clamped the table until it was straight and flat, and then I mounted the X on the back of this, on the bottom of it, with many screws and glue. And then once I released the clamps, that allowed it to hold in place using this X brace. The way that brace ended up kind of helped me figure out how I was going to do the bottom to have this join onto the base, and that was to put this here square piece in and have it cut out for the braces, obviously, and then that gave me a nice box that I could then use to put in the bottom piece in the cradle. I also put these small square pieces in the corner to help keep the edge square and in place when I took all the clamping off. And that overall gave me a nice flat tabletop surface that has stood up over time. So on the bottom, now that I had this square area or rectangular area that I could use for my attachment points, the next thing I did was I built the 2 cross pieces. So there's this cross piece which fits up underneath the table, and what I did was measure this box directly and I made this cross to fit that space. That way when these go up, they go just on the outside of the box on the tabletop. So then I made this cross piece out of some 2x4s, and underneath on the ends I put a 6-inch piece of 1x6 that it serves to keep it up off the floor. So if we had this full continuous length on the floor, if there was any imperfections in the floor, which we're in a 55-year-old house, so there is, it would cause us to rock. But having these feet on the ends allows it to stay nice and stable in the floor. I screw these together first, and then I cut this plane on them to make it a little fancier. But then I took this piece here and I put that, actually I centered it on here. I didn't secure it on here, but I set it on here, and I used it as a template to put these posts in place. So with everything clamped together and that top cross piece down here, I used Craig jig to attach these to the foot with screws. And then once I did that, I slid this up to the height it was supposed to be, which is, you know, these are 2x4s here, so 3.5 inches down, and I secured these in place here, and that gave me a really nice cradle that you know, really made it easy to put together once I've got it in place. So that was kind of a gross oversimplification of how I built this thing, but you can get the idea by just seeing what I did here. And it's something you can do yourself. It's a lot of work though. There's a lot of other things that go into it. A lot of sanding, especially using rough cut lumber like this. So using 2x4s and 2x6s means that you really have to do a lot of work pulling things together, squaring it up, sanding it, making it all nice and smooth. And then of course you got to finish it with stain and varnish. So, and a table, any table, is going to be a lot of work in that regard because there's so much surface area to cover. So this is meant as kind of a quick guideline to help you out. I am putting together plans on this, so hopefully by the time you're seeing this, they will be up on the website, but we'll put a link to that, and check in there to get the plans. And if you want to build your own, certainly ask any questions. I'll do what I can to help out in the comments. So hit like, hit subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.